Have you ever sat down on the couch with a bag of chips, fully intending to just eat a handful, and suddenly realize the entire bag is gone?
Oh, yeah. Completely gone.
Right.
Yeah.
You look down at the crumbs and genuinely wonder who ate the last cookie. And for decades, we've been told that this very universal experience is simply a failure of willpower.
Like we just lack self-control. Yeah.
Exactly. But what if the food itself was quite literally designed to outrun your brain's ability to feel full?
It is a profound shift in how we think about eating. I mean, when we stop looking at willpower and start looking at the physical mechanics of a meal, the entire narrative around why we overeat changes completely.
It really does. And to see this in action, I want to take you inside a high-tech food laboratory. So picture an environment that is pristine and meticulously controlled.
A very clinical setup.
Yeah, the researchers here are watching everything.
The
They are weighing and measuring every single bite a person takes, right down to the gram. Nothing goes on a plate and nothing comes back on a tray without being heavily documented.
Right. It's the ultimate observational environment. It is known as a metabolic ward, and in nutrition science, it is the gold standard because, well, nothing escapes the scale.
You aren't relying on people's memory.
Exactly. You aren't relying on people to remember what they ate yesterday. You know exactly what entered their body.
Right. And in this incredibly precise environment, a central mystery emerges. During one specific phase of a diet study in this lab, people spontaneously consume roughly 500 extra calories a day.
Which is huge.
It is. And they are not told to overeat. They aren't trying to gain weight. In fact, they don't even realize they are doing it.
But calorie intake just quietly, persistently creeps up. Just meal after meal without any conscious decision from the participants.
Which brings us to the driving question of this deep dive. Were these people truly hungrier, or did the food itself somehow make it easier to eat more before their biological fullness could catch up?
That is the million-dollar question.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to solve this mystery, we have to map out exactly how certain foods outsmart our biological hunger signals. And the best place to start is with the clinical trial that actually set up this mystery in the first place.
Right. This was a landmark 2019 inpatient trial led by Kevin Hall at the National Institutes of Health. And this study completely disrupted nutrition science because of how rigorously it isolated the variables.
How so?
Well, they brought 20 weight-stable adults into the clinical center and had them live there for a full month. For 14 days, they ate a diet entirely made of ultra-processed foods.
Wow, 2 whole weeks of just ultra-processed food.
Yeah, and then for the other 14 days, they ate an unprocessed diet, and they were randomly assigned to which phase they started first.
But the really crucial detail here for you listening is how these diets were built. Logically, if you compare a diet of drive-through fast food and candy to, I don't know, a diet of kale salads and grilled chicken, obviously there are going to be massive differences in caloric intake. But the researchers didn't do that. They performed culinary gymnastics to match these diets mathematically.
Precisely. The meals were meticulously matched for presented calories, total sugar, total fat, fiber, and macronutrients. So the underlying nutritional math of what was offered to the participants was virtually identical.
So they were eating the exact same nutritional profile.
Yes. If the unprocessed meal had 50 grams of carbs and 20 grams of fat, the ultra-processed meal had the exact same breakdown. The participants were simply told to eat as much or as little as they wanted ad libitum.
So on paper, the body should just register the energy. A calorie of carbohydrate is a calorie of carbohydrate, right?
That's the theory.
So logically, I would assume that because the macros and calories are mathematically identical, their intake should be identical too. Did the data actually reflect that?
It absolutely did not. The results were stark. On the ultra-processed diet, participants consumed an average of 508 more calories per day compared to the unprocessed diet.
That is wild.
And that surplus translated directly to their waistlines. They gained about 0.9 kilograms, so almost 2 pounds, during the 2 weeks on the ultra-processed diet. Conversely, they lost about 0.9 kilograms during the unprocessed phase.
A 500-calorie surplus without any conscious decision to overeat points to a massive flaw in how we traditionally view diet. I mean, that is essentially an entire extra meal secretly sneaking into your day.
It is a substantial amount of energy. But what's fascinating here is the psychological data they gathered alongside the physical data.
Oh, like how they felt.
Yes. Despite eating 500 more calories a day, the participants reported levels of hunger, fullness, satisfaction, and even their capacity to eat were not meaningfully different between the two diets.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they also rated the meals as equally pleasant.
Well, wait, I have to push back on this. If they weren't feeling any hungrier and the food wasn't magically more delicious or subjectively more satisfying, how does the food physically get in there?
It's a great point.
Like, you don't just accidentally ingest a 500-calorie surplus if your stomach and your brain are supposedly registering the same level of fullness.
Yeah, you're touching on the exact paradox the researchers had to solve. And the clue they found wasn't in the nutritional breakdown, but in the physical mechanics of the meal itself.
The mechanics.
Yeah, came down to the speed of consumption. Participants ate the ultra-processed meals significantly faster.
Wow.
When you look at the eating rate measured in both grams per minute and calories per minute, the ultra-processed food literally went down faster.
Yeah.
It required less mechanical effort from the jaw, and so it bypassed the body's natural pacing system.
So if eating speed is the primary culprit, we have to figure out what happens in the brain when fast, calorie-dense food hits the palate. Why are we driven to devour these specific types of foods so rapidly?
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because to answer that, we have to move out of the metabolic ward and look directly inside the human brain.
Which is exactly what researchers did in a brilliant 2018 study by DeFelice Antonio and colleagues. They wanted to understand how the brain estimates the energy value of different types of food before we even take a bite.
Before we even eat it.
Yes. So they put people inside an fMRI brain scanner and had them essentially play a food auction game. The participants bid real money for different snacks.
And they tested foods that were pure fats, pure carbohydrates, and the ultimate combination of both. So you had pure fat items, pure carbohydrate items, and then the heavy hitters, foods that combined high fat and high carbohydrates together.
The really tempting stuff.
Exactly. Your donuts, your pizza, your cookies, your ice cream.
Crucially, all the snacks they were bidding on were matched to be equally caloric. Calorie for calorie, the researchers wanted to see which macronutrient profile the brain valued most.
And the combination of fat and carbs absolutely dominated. The participants were willing to pay significantly more money for those combination foods.
Yes, and the fMRI scans revealed the underlying neural architecture, explaining why. Foods combining both fat and carbohydrates produce stronger, super additive responses in the reward-related regions of the brain.
Super additive.
Yeah, specifically in the dorsal striatum.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a proportional increase in brain activity. The combination potentiated the reward far beyond what fat or carbs did on their own.
I really like how this illustrates the compounding effect. It's like comparing fat and carbs to two musicians. You have a great guitarist playing solo and a great drummer playing solo.
Right.
They are fine solo acts. But when you put them together and they form a band, the output isn't just double, it's exponentially louder. The music hits you completely differently. The fat and carb band just rocks the brain's reward center.
That is a perfect analogy.
But mechanically, why does the brain react like that? Why does it overvalue the combination?
It comes down to how our brain visually estimates calories. We evolved in an environment where foods were generally either high in carbohydrates or high in fat, but rarely both.
That makes sense.
The brain uses a literal pathway from the visual center, the fusiform gyrus, which processes what the food looks like straight to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex.
Okay, that's a lot of brain anatomy.
Think of that second part as a biological accountant trying to estimate the caloric payload.
So it's looking at the food and trying to do the math before you eat it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the study found that for pure fats, that biological accountant is actually highly accurate. It estimates the energy density quite well.
Okay.
But when it came to carbohydrates, or those novel fat and carb combos, that accounting system essentially crashes. It cannot accurately estimate the energy density.
So the brain's visual accountant is looking at a donut and going, I have absolutely no idea how many calories are in this, but the band is playing incredibly loud and I want front row tickets.
That is exactly what the fMRI shows. The dorsal striatum just floods the system with reward valuation because it senses a massive, dense energy source. Though we do need to step in with some scientific precision here.
Oh, sure.
It's important to clarify that this study measured reward valuation, which is the willingness to pay and the brain activity associated with anticipating that food. It does not clinically prove food addiction.
Right, it's just about the anticipation.
Exactly. It doesn't prove that these foods inevitably cause weight gain in every single scenario. What it proves is how intensely the brain estimates and values the energy in these specific combinations, completely independently of how much the person subjectively likes the food.
That makes perfect sense. So the brain is highly motivated by these combinations, but how does that translate to the actual mechanics of a lunch or a dinner?
Right, taking it back to the plate.
Yeah. We know from the NIH study that ultra-processed foods are being eaten incredibly fast. And we know from the brain scans that fat and carb combos hijack our valuation system. How do these factors overlap in the real world?
For that transition from the brain scanner to the dining table, we could look at an incredibly comprehensive 2023 analysis by Fazzino and colleagues.
What do they do?
They didn't just look at a few isolated meals. They examined a massive data set of 2,733 meals across 4 entirely different dietary patterns. They analyzed everything from low-fat to low-carb diets to find the universal underlying drivers of overeating.
And despite the dietary pattern, they found 3 main suspects that consistently positively influenced how much ad libitum energy, meaning freely chosen calories, people took in.
Yes. Regardless of whether someone was on a low-carb diet or a low-fat diet, the 3 strongest predictors of higher calorie intake at a meal were, number 1, energy density, number 2, a faster eating rate, and number 3, a greater proportion of hyper-palatable foods.
I want to vividly define these 3 suspects for you because they are the ultimate culprits stealing your natural appetite cues. Think of energy density as a suitcase that is tightly packed with calories.
I love that.
It is physically small, it doesn't take up much room in your stomach, but it is incredibly heavy with energy.
A perfect way to visualize it.
Then you have eating rate. Think of that as a conveyor belt moving food into your mouth. The faster the belt moves, the more luggage gets loaded before the system can even register it.
Exactly.
And finally, you have those hyper-palatable foods, which, as we just discussed, are like pressing several reward buttons in the brain all at once.
Yeah.
But we should be really clear on this definition.
Yes, very important.
Because people tend to use the term hyper-palatable colloquially to just mean anything delicious. A perfectly cooked steak is delicious, but it's not necessarily hyper-palatable in this context, is it?
No, it is not. The Fazzino study utilizes a very objective, quantitative definition for hyperpalatable foods. It is not about subjective taste.
So what is it?
It is based on specific nutrient combinations crossing specific thresholds. It refers to foods that are high in fat plus sugar, or fat plus sodium, or carbohydrates plus sodium. These are distinct engineered combinations that are highly divergent from naturally occurring whole foods.
So it's the fat and carb band again, but maybe with salt playing the bass.
Exactly. And the real danger lies in how these 3 traits overlap. A single food item can be the ultimate culprit by executing all 3 mechanisms simultaneously.
Doing all 3 at once.
Yes. It can pack a massive amount of calories into a small bite, which gives it high energy density. It can be physically soft, so it requires very little chewing, which creates a high eating rate. And it can be formulated with those exact thresholds of fat, sugar, and sodium, making it hyperpalatable.
It is the perfect storm on a plate. The conveyor belt is moving at light speed, the suitcases are packed to bursting, and the reward buttons are jammed down.
Exactly.
When you lay out the mechanics like that, it completely reframes the NIH study. Of course, people ate 500 extra calories. The food bypassed every defensive mechanism the body has.
It just slipped right past the radar.
Which leads me to the ultimate practical question. If a food is ultra-processed, are we just biologically doomed to overeat it? Or can we hack its physical structure to fight back and slow down that conveyor belt?
That is the exact physiological question researchers wanted to answer, which brings us to our final piece of evidence. This is a brand new 2026 trial by Ford and colleagues.
Okay.
It functions as a brilliant, targeted follow-up to the original 2019 NIH study. They took 41 adults and put them on 2 different ultra-processed diets for 2 weeks each.
Wait, I want to clarify that. 2 ultra-processed diets, not 1 processed and 1 unprocessed like the first study.
Correct. Both diets were entirely made up of ultra-processed foods. This is a crucial moment for some myth-busting, because it proves that ultra-processed foods are not a monolith.
Ah, I see.
They are not all identical in how they interact with our digestive system. The researchers carefully matched these 2 ultra-processed diets for palatability, portion size, total energy served, energy density, and micronutrients.
So they are nutritionally identical, they are both highly processed, and they taste equally good. What was the variable they changed?
The singular difference was the texture.
Just the texture.
Yes. One diet was formulated with what they called a slower texture. It required more mechanical effort from the jaw. Think of harder, crunchier, or more al dente structures that physically resist being broken down immediately.
Okay.
The other was a faster texture diet, which was softer, heavily processed for a melt-in-the-mouth feel, and remarkably easy to swallow quickly.
Same calories presented, same processing classification, same taste, just a different amount of required jaw work. Did forcing people to chew more actually change their caloric intake?
Drastically.
Hmm.
The slower texture diet significantly reduced energy intake. On average, participants ate about 369 fewer calories per day across the two rungs on the slower texture diet compared to the fast one.
Wow.
And purely from that structural, textural change, participants actually lost 0.43 kilograms of body fat mass over the 14 days.
369 calories just because the food was a little more al dente. That is a massive shift.
It is.
I think the best way to understand the mechanism behind this is to think of biological fullness as a delayed text message from your stomach to your brain. It takes time for the message to send and be received.
That's a great way to put it.
If the conveyor belt of eating is moving too fast because the food is soft and requires almost no chewing, you're going to consume hundreds of extra calories before that text message arrives to say, hey, stop, we're full.
That analogy maps perfectly onto the human gut-brain axis. Satiation is not instantaneous. When you eat, food has to physically reach the stomach and activate stretch receptors in the gastric wall.
Right, the stomach literally stretches.
Yes, and those receptors send signals via the vagus nerve up to the brain. At the same time as food moves into the intestines, your body begins releasing a cascade of satiety hormones like peptide YY and GLP-1.
Okay, so the text message is traveling.
Exactly. These hormones have to travel through your bloodstream, cross the blood-brain barrier, and interact with your hypothalamus to signal that you have ingested enough energy.
And that biological text message takes time to deliver. It doesn't happen the second you swallow.
It generally takes about 15 to 20 minutes for that entire hormonal and neural cascade to fully register.
Wow.
The key revelation in Ford's study backs this up beautifully. When they asked the participants about their subjective appetite, it changed very little between the two diets.
So they weren't starving on the slower diet.
No, they weren't feeling restricted or hungry on the slower texture diet. It explicitly shows us that food structure, the softness, the required chewing time, the bite size, and the speed at which it breaks down in your mouth directly shapes how much energy is eaten before your body's natural satiation response has time to kick in.
So what does this all mean? We started with a mystery of 500 vanishing calories in a metabolic ward. We tracked the valuation system through an fMRI scanner optioning off snacks. We mapped out the 3 structural suspects on the plate. And finally, we saw how the literal texture of the food in our mouths can dictate our body fat mass.
What it means is that we arrive at a very reassuring, deeply non-judgmental takeaway. For decades, the conversation around overeating has been centered on guilt.
Yes, totally.
It's been framed as a personal failure, a lack of discipline. But this science shows us that food properties literally make self-control harder by altering the speed and the biological reward of eating.
It's not your fault.
No, your brain and your stomach are not broken. They are reacting exactly the way they evolved to react, but they are being outpaced by the physical mechanics of modern food.
And it is worth noting these studies don't establish some deliberate cartoon villain corporate intent to make us overeat.
Right, it's not a conspiracy.
They just reveal the physiological mechanics of how our bodies react to processed structures. Food science found the path of least resistance, soft, dense, high-reward foods, and our ancient biology simply can't process the signals fast enough to tell us to stop.
Exactly. The modern food environment has fundamentally changed the speed of energy delivery, and our biology is just trying to keep up with the conveyor belt.
Which brings me to a thought that I think perfectly wraps up everything we've unpacked today. Maybe the smartest food is not the food that makes you hungrier. It is the food that lets you eat faster than your fullness signal can speak.
That perfectly summarizes the data. It is all about the speed of the signal versus the speed of the bite.
I want to leave you with a final thought to explore on your own. Next time you sit down to a meal, don't just look at the calories or the macronutrients on your plate. Pay attention to how much work your jaw is actually doing. Are you chewing or are you just swallowing? Could the secret to eating less simply be a harder chew?